Oseo.
Oseo.
It's the Cherokee greeting, and Namaste.
Namaste.
That's the Indian greeting. Before humans inhabited this earth, there was an earlier race of beings called Nagas, who were almost as varied as we humans are now. The Nagas are still here, and they do show themselves now and then, as they are wont to do. But mainly their chief attributes are the snakes or serpents, lizards, and dragons. In India, the Nagas are most adored. And the month of July through August is the main celebration of the snake Nagas. And there are special days in particular when the creatures enjoy all kinds of affection and honor. And people have all kinds of ways, to carry out these honorings. So, feathering the snakes and feeding them milk, it's really amazing. Also, the Nagas are paramount in the transformation of woman, where the sensuousness and the sinuous come together to form the undulation of changes in her, the woman. For this continuity of movement is the attribute of her reality. So here in my drawing here, this is what I'm exactly illustrating. We're starting off with this term, the primal feminine. That means that factor that makes woman woman is the primal. And in this is in the form of a naga, of a serpent. And the serpent enters into the woman and becomes one with the woman's body, as it were a natural part of her own body. It does not harm her, and the woman nourishes this herself anew that has entered into her. And who is this herself? That is how we venerate. Jana in India is the principle of something that originates. So that's what we're talking about here. That something that's coming into existence in the woman. And the changes that go on in her that would be continuous. And this continuousness of changes is really what the serpent in the woman is really about. This undulation. It's a continuity of becoming, and that is the heart of reality. And it's this awareness that's coming into existence, and that's actually called Jani Gyana. So now you can come back to me for a moment. And all of this that I have brought together here is all about the Naga. A few weeks ago with Shiva, I did introduce the veneration and the specialness of the snake, serpent, and Naga that India has. Nowhere else in the world is like this. Although, through human histories that we know of, including Native America and Mexico, the serpent is continuous. I could say from the earliest humans, the serpent has always been the feminine. In the Mediterranean, it has almost, if not totally, been extinguished by what we call the patriarchy. And although the Jewish part or the Hebrew part of the Judeo-Christian is much as in collusion with the Christian in the denial of the serpent. And that was in the Adam and Eve story, like that. But that is a little bit fallacious, because those stories of Adam and Eve are very late. Some were between 700 and 1000 years old. Not there in the early part. But there is much evidence that the Hebrew, if we can call it that, the Hebrew culture, if I want to say religion, also incorporated the serpent. That's just a hint of that. But here, we're really concerned with the chief, or queen, I guess, the queen of the Naga is what I'm really emphasizing here. And you can go over here and you can see, this is my painting of Manassa. Manassa is the queen of the serpents. So keep over there. Jai, Manassa, who puts down the heroes of men. Devi, the snaky queen, can slay all enemies by frowning the brows of her lotus face. Jai, Devi, who strikes the earth with her hand, who pounds upon it with her feet, shaking the seven worlds with the sound of made by frowning her brows. Jai, to her, who stands in her dancing pose, who art the joy of Shiva's heart, and whose seed is shaking the mountains and all the three worlds. Jai, Jai. Now we can go right over here. I should have that little here. This is a very wonderful old illustration of Manassa with the many serpents all around her. I really like to look in her face there. So she is a very, very celebrated queen. Devi is the proper word for the English word goddess. So, and up here is a face, a mask as it would be, of her. She is, very current. This is still alive and going on. And ostensibly, the women in India, and there's many kinds, there is people that are referred to as tribal people. I don't know how many groups there are of that, but there is quite a variety. And as far as the Devis, or the feminine principle goes, it is constantly evolving. It is constantly coming up with new facets that women find and create. It is a very active feminine culture that has continued in India and is very necessary for us today. If we can go down here to this is my piece that I made some time ago. The red hibiscus is her flower. You can go down here. Here's another image that shows her, Manassa. Manassa is always the meaning her name basically is a kind of a Hindi Sanskrit, kind of rendered as spiritual. But her tribal name is Adivasa. Adi is Adi, or Aditi is like first, primal or first. Vasa also is kind of like new life, first life, or maybe the first spring. So we can have that. And on each side of her, these are other serpents. Then you come over here to this piece. This is pretty old, but I don't know how old it is. And so with this, I'm going to say, there was an earlier people in India who were the Nagas, and maybe they still exist, I mean, they were the Nagas, and it's guessed that the name Naga came from the Nagas. In other words, it's not a Sanskrit kind of word. And this is a piece, like a mask, and as far as that I know, these kind of things these kind of metal masks were put on certain rocks that were venerated. So this is an actual piece from the Nagas. Now, in modern times, some people collectively are referred to as Nagas, almost like here in English America, Native Americans are being called tribes, you know, collectively tribes, the tribes. So there's a collective nomination of some groups of people called Nagas. They're different from the earlier genuine Nagas. And down here, here's a little metal figure. This is of Parvati, and Parvati was the active partner, is the active partner for Shiva. And what's notable about this is a replica, as tiny as it is, of life-size bronze figures in southern India, the Chola dynasty, that are amazing pieces, and even this miniature of it is very good. It's very good. But the poses, you know, definitely show the sensuousness of the dance. Again, Shiva originates there. Many of these indigenous deities, as we can refer to them, that have originated in southern India. In southern India, mainly, these people called the Dravidians by the Aryans are the earlier, if not the First Nations people of India that have collected more and more in the southern part of India. Some groups may actually come from the Indus Valley, that very ancient civilization, to the very west of India, which is now in Pakistan. So there's almost a pooling there. I don't know how many different kinds of language and groups there are in India, but we can kind of think in a very general way. There's a North India and a South India. The North is patriarchal, the South is matriarchal. You can kind of have that idea there. And I want to go all the way over here. Also, with Manassa, you know, the serpent queen and everything, there's also the pervasiveness of the serpent in the deities. And this one would be portraying Vishnu in the serpent Seshu. And you can see that he's there, and then there's, you know, the hood, like that. And here in front I have a little figure. It's quite unique and quite detailed. It's showing, you know, a little man, you know, with the hood of the serpent. He's standing on the coils like that. It may be Krishna, but basically the idea between this and this is that Vishnu is the one Hindu deity that incarnates, that is, that Vishnu in different forms or in different people or in different creatures comes into the world, comes into the living world, you know, basically to bring about something good, if not to save the world from its own error. And so Avatar is the name for these incarnations. And so that avatar is protected by the hood of the serpent. That's what's being illustrated here, exactly. Then over here, this is a little shrine or a little temple. And what I'm likening it to is my drawing here. And the temple, let's say, is housing is housing Ganesha alongside of Manassa. Now, I don't know if anybody's ever tried to figure out how many temples there may be in India. Maybe like saying as many as the star in the sky or the sands of the Ganges. But there are regions, and in the north and east regions or west regions, the temples themselves are deities, and the architecture is made by architects who are specialized in this, just as all of the figures are also made by specialists like that. But the other ones in other parts of India are mostly kind of square or towers or something like that. And it's only in the south that there is the rounded or globe sort of temple. It's called Coyote, like that. And what I have illustrated here is, this is her, and this braid, the priestesses, the women, the yoginis, the jakinis, all the braid is to refer to Manassa, to the serpent queen. And here she is looking at, I invented this of course, but this is the temple of the moon. You can see that means everything for woman in that way. Also, so you can just kind of come back to her here, as Manassa is also called Netra, because it is her who, through her trusting spirit, reveals her hidden face to the one who turns toward her, because it is she herself who both hides her face and reveals herself. And so that's how it's particularly symbolized by what we're calling this third eye. The third eye is called the Netra. All of these images, whether pictures or figures in any size whatsoever, what they all are a part of in India is very different from the Judeo-Christian or even the Buddhist or any of that, is that these images are made for individuals to really focus on them, to really take them in, to absorb them. So in the accurate images, like I showed Ganesha last time, all of the symbols are all a part of that. And all of that is called Manassa Yaga. Manassa Yaga. Literally mental worship. But the Manassa in that actually means the mind full of desire. And even I read this before, let me do it. If someone were to know the person whose dwelling is desire, whose world is the heart, and whose light is the mind, the ultimate refuge of every self, he would truly be a knower. I know the person you speak of, the ultimate refuge of every self. He is the person made of desire. Who is his Devi? Tell me, Coyote. Woman, I said. She is for me my Manassa Yaga. That is my spiritual adoration. In Sanskrit, Manassa ha sivata mani pravisit is what that says in Sanskrit. So that's what these images are for me. These are that Manassa Yaga, that of woman. Now to go along with this little temple here, and this temple in my drawing, here's a little poem from an Indian poet, Arun Kolatar. You can look at me. You can focus on me to read this. A low temple. A low temple keeps its devas in the dark. You lend a matchbox to the priest, the hotari. One by one, the devas come to light. Amused bronze, smiling stone, unsurprised. For a moment, the length of a matchstick, gesture after gesture, revives and dies. Source after lost source is found and lost again. Who was that, you ask? The 8-armed Devi, the priest replies. A skeptic match coughs. You can count, but she has 18 arms, you protest. All the same, she is still an 8-armed Devi to the priest. You come out of the dark and light an incense. Children play on the back of the 20-foot Naga. So that way we have some poem actually from India, and I believe that I've focused on everything here to carry through this exaltation of the Nagas in India. And now I have a poem by Mary Oliver. Usually it's pretty good when I can round it up at the end with Mary Oliver. It's called Water Snake. I saw him in a dry place on a hot day, a traveler making his way from one pond to another, and he lifted up his jarry face and looked at me with his gravel eyes, and the feather of his tongue shot in and out of his otherwise clamped mouth. And I stopped on the path to give him room, and he went past me with his head high, loathing me, I think, for my long legs, my poor body like a post, my many fingers, for he did not linger, but touching the other side of the path, he headed in long lunges and quick heaves, straight to the nearest basin of sweet black water and weeds and solitude, like an old sword that suddenly picked itself up and went off, swinging and swinging through the green leaves, from mere incidents into the lush of meaning. So that concludes my exposition on the Naga and the Naga Queen Manassa. Thank you.